What do you get when you cross the Black Company with the Bridge Burners and make them relic hunters that go into haunted, ancient places to look for stuff? Well, pretty freaking awesome book is what. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to be talking about The Haunt on the Island of Esmer by Justin A.W. Blair. This was a review copy sent to me by the author, and we'll get to this, but this is very much a don't judge a book by its cover type of situation because I was really blown away by how good this one is. This is definitely one of the better review copies I've ever received in the whole time I've been accepting review copies. This is one that will undoubtedly be on my top 10 books for quarter 4 and might even be cracking the top 10 list for the year, although that's a really competitive list this year, and I don't know what all is going to be on it by this means, but so suffice to say, I really enjoyed this book. This was so good for so many reasons, but I will talk before I start going into all of the things that I really loved about this. I will talk about the obvious, the elephant in the room, the cover and the design of this, because it's not good, and I know it is. I gave direct feedback to the author, very blunt about this as well, that it's just there are some issues. The like the text and everything inside too. There's just a lot that didn't seem to come out. This is, I know, somebody who is trying, and he did say specifically he was trying to find a covered art and that he couldn't afford at the time when he was getting it out. I will note too, I have it because the ebook cover is a little bit better. It's like it's kind of zoomed out. I'm still not a fan, but I would say it's a little bit better. So if anything, check it out in ebook. But so I will call it out. Well aware of it. Not going to gloss over it because that's really the big issue that I had with this. Is I saw this and I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, because you have that part of you that's always like, oh gosh, that looks like it's bad. It probably is going to be bad. It is not. I can assure you this was really good. Now, the thing I will say is, because I mentioned the Black Company and the Bridge Burners, I was not the biggest fan of the Black Company. I was pretty middling on it. I read the first 3 and I did enjoy them, but it was more like a 3-ish stars, not anything that I was super big as well. And I have mixed complex feelings on Malazan as well, but I really do think that's a good comparison, because the author did specifically state that this was inspired by the Black Company, Malazan. I think Martin was the other person he mentioned, which I didn't get a ton of here. But you could very much see that this has that Black Company inspiration with the relic hunters of the Ninth, who are kind of our main characters that we start and we're introduced to. They're these soldiers. They're very gruff, and then the way they talk to there's it's not a huge part of it at all, but there's briefly throughout, there's one of them who's kind of chronicling things that are happening, which is kind of a nod to the Black Company. So you get a lot of that feel, but you also have definitely a bit of the Bridge Burners with the camaraderie, with the structure, with the people. They use kind of different nicknames like Scrolls or All Red. The mage is just called Mage, that kind of thing. So they all have kind of different names with kind of a nod there. And just kind of the feeling is, I think, kind of a mesh, because I like this a lot more than I liked the Black Company, to be perfectly honest. So that's where, like, I think if you really like the Black Company, this is absolutely something to check out. Even if you weren't a huge fan, I liked this a lot more than the Black Company, to be perfectly honest. So I still think worth checking out. But let's talk a little bit more about it as well. So I mentioned the Relic Hunters of the Ninth. They're these soldiers. I'm going to be a little bit vague because you don't fully find out a lot about them, and a lot of the world, what they do in general, is left very vague on purpose, and it kind of builds this mystery, builds the tension as you start to find out more. And even then, you're not really prepared for what is going to happen, and I think that effect works really well, especially with it. But they are looking for a haunt, and they're relic hunters. We understand that they do go around and try to find treasure, and they seem to have some sort of a complicated past and history as a unit, and I think some of that complicated past is where it gives a little bit of the Bridge Burners feel, so you can infer from that what you will. But they have a bit of a complicated past, but they are leaving the areas of the Throne Lands, and they end up finding a map that leads them to this island called Esmer, and that's where they're going to be going to look for a haunt. Now, very early on, too, we don't really know what a haunt is. We don't really fully understand, and we're not going to until about the halfway point in the book. But there's all of these talks about them, how they're all kind of scarred and never the same after they go into one. There's mentions of the downside fever and the upside fever, where it's just you struggle once you go down into a haunt, but then even once you come back, you're still not quite the same. That kind of like sickness, it's changed people. Some of the characters are really withdrawn. Some of the characters seem like they're just a little bit, not all there in the head anymore. And so it's just this very sinister thing that's set up. And you do have initially the characters feel like they're gonna be a little bit one note, but I will note you do get quite a lot more of them. But you have the very gruff leader who's the only person who actually gets like a normal name as well. You have the person who's kind of the chronicler and the scribe. You have the person who's sort of the the really big warrior, and then you have other people who just have different roles, but they all are this unit. They all fit in. They all are kind of this close knit bond, which gives kind of some of the feeling of both. But so you see this group, and then what I think is done extremely well is then all of a sudden, after we're kind of introduced to here, we get this feel of these soldiers. We're introduced to a character who is called Lookout. And Lookout is a younger boy who is just kind of thrown up into a guard tower that guards really nothing on this island of Esmer. And that's where he is. And he just sits there and kind of drinks and dreams of glory and battles and being a knight. And his sort of companion, or as he would probably call him, a servant, both, who is a boy who was actually born on the island and lived there, whereas Lookout is his father was an ex-soldier who had retired there. And so he is just like an extremely naive character, doesn't really know anything. And at first it feels like it doesn't quite fit because it feels so incredibly different, but it ends up working out so incredibly well because we see this naive character who gets kind of wrapped up in what's going on. And the perspective we get is really, I think, important because then we get to learn more about these soldiers and the members of the Relic Hunters of the Ninth through his eyes and his kind of naive worldview, and we find out more, and that different perspective ends up meshing super, super well with the grittier perspective. And there is, I won't go into any details either, but there is another POV that's kind of brought in just a little bit later and not like super late in the story, but not quite at the beginning either. Again, at first I'm like, oh, this feels like this is kind of weird. How is this going to fit in? But again, it was woven really, really well because this is another POV from somebody who is sort of in the middle. They very much have a lot of world experience, and they have experience with some of the, twisted things that are left by whatever ancient civilization left the haunts, because there's this place that's mentioned that's called the pits where people will go to search for treasure. That's kind of like a much lesser version, but then we get to see that person who really thinks that they know things. They've experienced a lot of horror in their life, but there's so much more to come. And so then it allows us to have another perspective that again just deepens and enriches our experience once we really finally get to see the haunt, because the haunt is obviously the big thing. It's the title of the book, The Haunt on the Island of Esmer. It's where we're going, and it's just like I said, once you get there, you're not even there's no preparing, and that's kind of the idea that you get from the soldiers is just like there's no preparing. You just get there. And we spend a lot of time there, which is, I think, great. And it just is really, really compelling stuff, fascinating stuff. And the amount of world building you get from a lot of little things too, the way people say things, or just these little facts that we learn. Like, for example, there's an island called the Green Island that has a lot of twins born there, and they tend to be either giants or dwarves, basically. It's like you're one or the other. And just like an interesting little factoid, we learn about there's this like wasteland in the east, and they don't believe that there's anything past it. There's lots of little bits, things like that. And I am a sucker for like the ancient civilization leaving relics and that kind of thing as well, especially when it's like this, magic or technology that's not understood, because you can see that in both fantasy and sci-fi. This is, very much fantasy, but it's like that kind of thing. And so it's like, I'm a sucker for that as well. And I really enjoy it. And it just works very well here with what's happening. And this is something that the world building, the characters, the plot, everything I think worked really, really well. This does sit a little bit more on the Black Company side, where it's not like it's not super tightly plotted or anything like that. But things, like I said, the elements are woven together really, really well. And this doesn't feel like this is like a debut from a newer author by any means. This feels like this person's had a lot of experience. They've really honed the craft, and it never feels like it's derivative either with the elements, there's the clear inspirations, but they're done in different and unique ways. There's different focuses, and everything comes together just really, really cohesively. And again, it's very, very good book. I was really, really impressed with this. The one thing that I would say to me felt just a little bit off is there were some things that happened toward the end that felt just a little bit rushed, because there was we had some stuff that was kind of being set up from the start, and then it happens, and there were some really cool scenes, but just one small element of the ending felt a little bit rushed. But then the actual ending again just felt kind of perfect, even though it's I can't say without spoilers. I can't really be more detailed, but the ending was very satisfying. There were some elements that just felt a little bit rushed, but then the way that we finally went to the very ending, the falling action, I thought also again was handled really, really well. And it's a book that stands extremely well on its own, although there's very much so much more potential to happen here as well. So I will be very curious, because I don't actually know if this is intended as a standalone or the first book in a series. I think it could go either way. Very satisfying either way, so I'm gonna have to ask now. I'm realizing I probably should have asked before doing a review, but yes. So anyway, just I really do recommend this. Like I said, if you're a fan of the Black Company, I think you're really going to enjoy this, even if you're not a huge fan of it too. I think this does the elements in some different ways, and so to appeal broadly. It is kind of darker, but it's more like dark fantasy. It doesn't really feel super grimdark despite the darkness. And part of that, I think, is because very smartly we have shifting POVs that kind of lighten things. Because we have our younger, naive character who's always trying to like look at the bright side and that type of thing. And then we have the characters who have a much darker viewpoint, and we have the people in the middle too. And it allows us to experience a wide range of emotions and see a wide range of reactions to what's happening. And so really, really handled well. But I definitely recommend checking this out. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it is on Kindle Unlimited, so that's a great way for you to just try it and see, because the writing style is something that I think is not going to be for everybody. Similar to, like, it took me a little bit to get into Black Company. It took me a little bit to get into this, just because the writing style, especially with the Relic Hunters of the Ninth, it's just kind of like they say a lot of things abruptly. They have a lot of one-word responses. They'll say things like true spoken or fortune, things like that, and it's just kind of this gruff thing, which really fits the characters very well. But the shift in how things are described and how character see things and POVs, again, I think helps with that, and balances really, really well. So I feel like I've been talking for a while about this, but like I said, I am so enthusiastic. Please go check this book out. Like I said, it's on Kindle Unlimited, so you can, if you have that, you can check it very easily. And I think I don't remember what the ebook cost is, but I think it was extremely reasonable as well. Highly, highly recommend checking this out. Don't be turned off by the art. I know it's an issue, and like I said, I gave very detailed feedback on it, because this is just the kind of book that I want to shout about, and I want people to know, and I don't want people to be turned off by that. And I know it's human nature. Like I said, I kind of had the same thing too. But this is very much worth checking out. A lot more than meets the eye with just looking at it. So yeah. Definitely a book that I recommend, and you will hear me talking about more than that. So I was the first review for this on Goodreads, so I'm assuming, even though there were a couple of Amazon reviews, I'm assuming none of you have read this, so I won't say, look, let me know your thoughts, but let me know your thoughts on any of the things I said. If this sounds like something that you'd be interested in, or that you're planning to pick up as well. And let me know some other book that maybe the cover's not good but was actually really, really good, and can let me know there as well. But would love to hear from you as always in the comments, so let me know down below. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description as always for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizardly Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun, and we'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.